Welcome back to the discussion Zoning In on Information and Location in Government, sponsored by Here Technologies on Federal News Network. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, and my guest today is Pratik Desai. He's the Senior Project Marketing Manager for Global Public Sector here at Here Technologies. And Pratik, I wanted to ask about the innovations that Here Technologies is actually doing. You talked about some really cool stuff with planning before a disaster actually happens. What are some of the other things you're working on since you're very close to the technology sector and are working in that space?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. There's a number of things that are quite exciting. So, you mentioned one right now, which is Here LiDAR data, which, to put in the most simplest terms, we're building a video game environment of the world. So it's a 3D point cloud of the entire atmosphere. Every single point on the map has geo-coordinates to it. So think about a 911 call that tells you there's a disaster here, and what you're going to do is send people to an address. Well, using this enhanced technology, we can actually get you to a point where not only do you know where the disaster is occurring, you know what corridor of the building it's occurring in, ostensibly even what floor it's on, or what room it's in. That's what you can do with kind of Here LiDAR data. A number of other things that we're working on relate to routing. We have matrix routing solutions that enable us to, let's say if there is a major disaster, a national disaster, where you got to get a bunch of DHS, FEMA, and National Guard, convoys out there. Our convoy routing solution can essentially develop optimal routes for up to 1,000 vehicles all at once, right? This is not something that is consumer grade at all. Like, we're taking into consideration different variables like inclement weather, rerouting traffic, potential road attributes such as road roughness, which would slow down the velocity of the vehicle, and therefore, your ETAs are going to be affected by this. We also have the ability to provide indoor mapping solutions as well. So think about walking into a shopping mall or an airport. We can essentially take the schematic or the blueprint of the building and provide an entire map of the entire building. So now if you're a public safety agency and you have a need to respond, we can literally help you from the desk where the call is taken to the phone where the first responders getting it, all the way to the exact location of where the incident's taking place via waypoint routing. So there's a number of things. It's covering visibility, it's covering a 3D environment, incorporating a new innovation called the Z-axis. So you're going to start to hear about this a lot more as well, right? We've got the X and Y down, and now we're introducing the Z. And that's where a lot of these 3D LiDAR solutions are really helping. And then last but not least, the routing and mobility.
How will 5G affect what you're doing, especially with the transmission of data? I know that's something that's really starting to build its infrastructure around the United States.
Yeah, if anybody's ever watched Star Wars, they were almost a half a century ahead of their time, to be quite honest. Think about when Princess Leia is getting that hologram, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. We think that 5G will essentially enable us to bring big data, extremely big data solutions to the palm of your hand, so that a first responder can actually kind of see in the palm of their hands where exactly they're going. We're not in the business of holograms, but if there is a modality like that released, we want to be on that platform, and we think that we can do that. So that's one thing, is just bringing more data to bear at kind of the outer edges. Another thing that 5G can do, and this is really critical for public safety agencies, because they don't exist just to serve metropolitan areas. Like Chicago Metro is 9.5 million people. But there's people who live out, in the outer suburbs, in rural areas. These are citizens of our communities, and we still have to serve them. How do we account for the fact that emergency response times out in rural areas are significantly higher and data connectivity is much more sparse? Well, with 5G, we can bridge those gaps. And remember, going back to what we talked about earlier with scenario planning, if we kind of help to develop some muscle memory with these agencies, they can start to forecast and anticipate with some regularity. Okay, hey, listen, if I'm getting, let's say, 100 calls a month, and 10 of them are coming from rural areas, I can now then deploy emergency vehicles to certain sectors of my locality based on that anticipation of need. So now, just by being smarter with your data, you're not dropping new trucks, they're not putting faster trucks in, you're not doing any of that. This is literally just deploying vehicles in anticipation of future needs. And again, this is using technology that we already have. You're getting smarter and helping to save more lives. Because again, seconds matter when it comes to something critical like cardiac arrest, or if somebody's having trouble breathing.
So, speaking of seconds matter and that sort of thing, the National Guard recently had to have, a response in the Capitol. Didn't exactly go that well. And, now we have Congress and other agencies looking into what went wrong with that. So there are clearly pitfalls within the public sector agencies that are in charge of taking care of the citizenship. What are other pitfalls, and where are you seeing those pitfalls that cause delays, that cause people to not get the help they need in time?
Yes, I mean, just to put into context here, the government is still spending a ton on technology. They're spending almost 20% of their budget sometimes, depending on the agency, on IT, and then 17% of that will be spent on software. All in all, the United States is dropping a little bit over $5 trillion in spend, right? So even a percentage of that, like they're putting some serious money into this. That's about a fifth of what the S&P 500 is worth in terms of revenue. So I don't want to, diminish the efforts there, but what we can do is help to get smarter with some of the allocations, right? Like when we talk these conversations with agencies, we're not even necessarily looking to replace anybody's solution. We're an add-on. Like we believe in open and extensible APIs. So a lot of times if you're an agency that has like a really cool tool set that you use for response or for training, a lot of times we can just plug into it and we can kind of feed that data into whatever you're doing. So I think the intelligence part is key. I'm going to continue to hit on this again. Scenario planning is really going to represent the future of public safety agencies over the next decade or so. The notion of building that muscle memory and that preparedness will help to heighten alertness and reduce that kind of lethargy or anticipation, like hesitation that occurs because you're just getting there faster. Now, with the situation like you have a major metropolitan area, again, indoor mapping is key because now you can provide a view into entry and exit points. Guys, like this isn't just a once in a year exercise. Think about, prior to COVID-19, think about how often we had concerts. Think about sporting events, the Bulls playing at the United Center or the Lakers at the Staples Center. These are major collections of people. And when you have a major collection of people, the risk profile goes up. Again, we can actually help with mapping out risk exposure as well using geolocation and geointelligence. And getting these agencies thinking more about, okay, guys, like you've got 82 NBA games in the season, half of them are home games. If, even 10% of them go wrong, that means that's 4 home games we need to plan for where there could be a fire, a flood, electrical wiring goes awry. So we really do think that scenario planning is going to represent kind of that way of the future. And the way that we can do that is by having these conversations about what are the activities that are taking place on the ground and where are the biggest gaps. We talked about some basic ones, right? So how fast are my vehicles getting to, respond? Or where will disaster occur? Unless you know all the different entry and exit points of a building, you may not realize that you're not just going to have fires in the front of the building. You could have it in the back, right? Or if you're running into a building, what if it's been locked off and you didn't know about it? Like these are the things that we can map out on, scenario planning and geolocation and essentially inform these agencies where to go and where not to.
So it seems like, as you've talked about this, we've talked a lot about location and location data, but Here Technologies, it seems, has moved away from that and sort of evolved itself into something more than just data of locations and mapping and that sort of thing, and more into sort of a platform. Is that a correct characterization?
It is. I mean, think of us as like the analogy I use, depending on what region of the country you're from. It's like a hamburger or a taco. There's different layers to it, right? And we sit kind of right in the middle. So if you're a taco, we're the meat or the beans. If you're a burger, we're the patty. And that means that you're going to have solutions on top of us and below us. And that's by design. We get calls from our partners, both public and private sector, all the time because we can plug into all different layers of it. What that essentially means is that we can have intelligent conversations that go outside of mapping, right? Like we're evolving mapping with HD mapping. We're working on autonomous vehicles. We believe we have the wherewithal to support, UAV and drone routing with our HERE LiDAR data solution, but also talking about some of these other activities beyond scenario planning. What about predictive capabilities? We've got a partnership with a company called Logis Solutions, and we serve the public safety market. And through their dashboard, they're able to essentially predict where an emergency vehicle is going to be, 5-10 minutes into the future. That's groundbreaking. What if we can do that for every single agency in America or the world? What if we can do that, and extend that time horizon out beyond that? We're just getting smarter about emergency response. We're also having conversations about risk analysis and exposure. Again, this is not a bread and butter mapping topic, but in reality, it can be. That's where GIS comes in. We also play in the GIS space. So having foundational mapping data, building a platform, and essentially saying, hey, government agency, if you have some information on risk profile by neighborhood, we can build that into our platform. And then you can essentially understand where to deploy vehicles based on the day of the week, based on time of day, right? Like maybe you have a sector of the city where there's more older buildings, more prone to electrical fires. You can essentially station more vehicles there in anticipation of this. And again, none of this has to do with any new capital expenditure. Think about it. New vehicles, no nothing. So this is just about getting smarter with what you have and the notion of doing more with less. And the reason I think it's important is because globally, there's over 500,000 government agencies, right? So even when we think about, say, 100,000 of them roughly are serving public safety, the vast majority of them are going to be state and local, meaning city or county or provincial. And therefore, they may not necessarily have the resources of a Department of Homeland Security. But our stack serves every type of agency of every type of size, no matter what. And a lot of what you talked about with platform capabilities goes back to APIs. And the thing with APIs, without getting too much into the engineering of it, is that it's just based on a data exchange. So we can share as much or as little data as you need.
And just real quick as we close here, COVID-19 is obviously part of life now. What are you doing to work on that? And how is that working into that dynamic place that you are? I mean, it sounds like you're really at the sort of membrane of that sort of, area.
Yeah, we have a number of initiatives right now. We're having conversations with a number of government agencies to essentially provide them the ability to locate testing and vaccination centers. We've also done kind of a pro bono initiative with the city of Chicago. We have essentially we believe the tools to, continue to help our society and our communities to really get over this, right? 2020 is the year of, renewed growth and regeneration. And we think that we can help out, and we're actively having these conversations. If there are any public safety agencies out there that want to know kind of how we can help on COVID-19, again, just reach out to us. We have a lot of things that we can just take off the truck and show you how to use them. Whether it's identifying where exactly to place vaccination sites, if you're having any public deployment of vaccines, or if you still want to accelerate your testing, right? If you want to get a greater regularity to it, right? Like when schools open back up after a certain season, or when seasons change and we get into summertime and we anticipate more people being outside, more cars on the road. And these are all geolocation topics that we believe we can help on. And because COVID-19 is still very much a reality for us, we believe that we can kind of be trusted partners to help out.
Very interesting. Well, we've had two really interesting guests today. We had Colonel Paul Hessling. He was the Chief of Plans, Programs, Operations Division at the National Guard Bureau. And we just heard from Pratik Desai. He's the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Global Public Sector here at Here Technologies. And, Pratik, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search here.